Hey, you geeks! Once again, we are diving into literary classics that have been recommended to me multiple times, but I didn't read until now. C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet is a lot in such a little book. Yet people flounder over donuts to tell me what exactly it's about. Even when discussing it amongst friends who had read it, the conversation quickly denigrated into which one of Lewis's four loves is the one with the polka dot dress.
First is the worst, second is the best, third is the one with the hairy chest. That's not fair.
Apparently, people do say that Out of the Silent Planet is the first and worst book of C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, but I liked it. So, here are 10 things that people don't usually say about Out of the Silent Planet. Opening Pandora's box. I decided to read this book because I was told that James Cameron's Avatar was the closest thing this book ever had to a live-action film adaptation.
What does that have to do with anything?
No. He's got a point.
A former soldier flung into a far-off world at the mercy of a rampant capitalist.
Now those savages are threatening our whole operation. We're on the brink of war, and you're supposed to be finding a diplomatic solution.
And a militaristic, racist jerk.
I need to know how to force their cooperation or hammer them hard if they won't.
So the soldier throws his lot in with the idyllic locals who have a very close connection with their local divine being. Associating James Cameron's Avatar with Lewis's work is far more complimentary than Cameron's racist and insensitive work deserves. But it is fair to say that both stories are more about exploring new alien worlds and oddly feature taller aliens with a high tolerance for low oxygen, unlike the humans. This book is old.
Very old. Full of memory. And anger.
Like, so old that it predates the melding in pop culture of eldritch horror with Lovecraftian space monsters. Rather, Lewis had to spell it out, like no insect-like vermiculate or crustacean abominable, no twitching feelers, rasping wings, slimy coils, curling tentacles, no monstrous union of superhuman intelligence and insatiable cruelty seemed to him anything but likely on an alien world. There are also quirks of it being written before humanity knew what splitting an atom actually looked like, as well as how long it would approximately take to get to the moon.
Well, they're not any big meals, just pills and stuff. You can't hold on for 4 days, mate.
It also, unfortunately, predates the concept of adding extra plot to science fiction. It's more of a philosophical treatise with a smattering of plot. At least Out of the Silent Planet is short and not the Dickensian tome I had envisioned with long, rambling, incoherent sentences. Rather, there is humor and fascination to be found within its pages, though finding them is, as Lewis would say,
Cruel is a matter of perspective.
yeeting Tolkien into space. We begin with the main character Ransom, whose name I'm sure has all sorts of philosophical meaning. Ignoring that, let's just acknowledge that he is the prototypical Edwardian gentleman who we today love to lambaste. Moreover, he's a philologist, a lover of language.
Why can't the English teach their children how to speak?
Much like Tolkien. After a smattering of research into how Lewis came to write this book, It's clear that he started the noble tradition of launching Tolkien into space and seeing what happens in science fiction. Here we see that Tolkien would totally risk life and limb to discover an alien language and unlock the true origin of all language, a pursuit which has yielded great results on this channel. Though Ransom isn't pure Tolkien. For one, they have distinctly divergent insights on the concept of stairs. Lewis and Ransom seem to have the idea of the more typical stairway to the heavens with Sorns, while Tolkien's stairway goes somewhere else. Tolkien's paths to havens are no less perilous, but much more pleasant.
I cannot see where the pathway leads. Do we follow it or no?
Follow it, of course!
Behold, the only truly profound thought in the Hobbit movies. For Lewis, like Tolkien, liked to write based on his own faith journey, which for Lewis was the story of his conversion, finding God in the midst of sinners. So it's not really surprising that Ransom's companions were space Nazis.
I hate these guys.
Ransom's companions and captors were literally proto-Nazis. In Weston's case, he is merely seeking to expand the realm of civilized man.
Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis.
Though it is very odd for a contemporary reader that Oyarsa identifies Weston's love of race as a positive trait, a good, rational love which has been distorted. This love, Oyarsa says, is higher than Divine's blind greed.
And it's mine.
Though Lewis ultimately has Weston pledge his loyalty to the Silent One, thus foreshadowing what history would ultimately prove and what Plato and Dante have long theorized, which is love of the highest things distorted makes the greatest of evils. Defending the planet of hats. Malacandra has 3 races, each with their own distinct stereotype or literary hat.
My hat, it has 3 corners.
Given that Lewis was out to disprove the proto-Nazi civilization taking hold of, quote, intellectual Europe at the time, the creation of 3 races, 3 now, all rational and all equally worthy of life, would be what most would call today pro-diversity. But Lewis takes it a step further, showing that from the Malacandrian perspective, humanity's universal fallen state is the literary hat that we all wear in the greater universe.
And remember, people, that no matter who you are and what you do to live, thrive, and survive, there's still some things that make us all the same.
This is to contrast what civilized men like Weston want, to weed out the inferior men and now from the universe. Lewis shows how narrow-minded Weston's, quote, high-minded ideals are. Lewis has a way of truly flipping the tables on his critics in this book, and that is the most enjoyable aspect of Out of the Silent Planet. Philologist v. Physicist. The great meta-humor of the first third of Out of the Silent Planet comes from Weston opining offhandedly that if only Ransom could be made to understand the gravity of his situation, he would go with them willingly. Then, of course, Weston refuses to explain because Ransom is not a physicist and therefore could not possibly understand.
You treat us like a pack of galahs.
That's a kind of parrot.
The reader will, of course, note that this entire book is written by a philologist who has a surprisingly good grasp of Einstein's theory of relativity. which had only come out like 10 years prior to this book's original release. We see it in the book's spherical spaceship creating its own mini-gravitational field compared to those of Earth, Malacandra, and the Moon. These theories at the time would not be tested until the 1950s and 60s.
And all those objects, including me, appear to float.
Thus, it's impressive how much Lewis got comparatively right. Moreover, Lewis's sworn takes a philosophical approach to Einstein's problem of waves and particles. Lewis speculates that a body's movement is its form, and its speed is what gives us matter. That which Aquinas would call pure form with no matter is what Lewis would call a body who moves so quickly that we cannot see it. Thus, this body, though invisible, is ever present. Something Schrodinger's cat could not even fathom. Thus, Lewis shows that the races Weston had deemed inferior had, in fact, surpassed Weston's own knowledge to an almost satirical degree. I truly thought this book was satire when Weston emerges in the spaceship butt naked. A grand joke, as it were, on how civilized man has become so advanced that he has reduced himself back to his most primitive state. Though perhaps Lewis isn't opposed to that idea. Read Paradise Lost first, or soon thereafter, if you want to get a taste of what Lewis thought a world without sin would look like. This is one of my standing objections to Lewis, but for now we can just view it as the base on which Lewis built his world that was still in communion with their Oyarsa and their god. This also accounts for men being naked not in space, but in the heavens, wherein it is only natural for man to be unclothed before his superiors. Beavers. Lewis has quite a soft spot for furry aquatic mammals who fish. Makes me wonder what he thought of the people of Ulster. For example, let me see if you've heard this one. A traveler gets waylaid at an eccentric British professor's mansion in rural England. Once there, hijinks ensue, and the traveler gets swept away into a fantastic world, where he finds an unlikely home with...
He's a beaver. He shouldn't be saying anything.
Then afterward, there's this long quest to go see the local divinity, and in the magician's nephew's case, both end with the villainous modernist getting soaked several times by the locals whose language the modernist cannot understand. In Out of the Silent Planet, we see Lewis's proto-Narnian thoughts. Though Ransom is notably not there to save the Malacandrians, rather the opposite, just as Peter is not come to Narnia to bear the, quote, white man's burden as coined by Kipling and parroted by Devine. Rather, both stories convey Lewis's sort of fatalism, as we see in Malacandra with their prehistoric singers with advanced society that were ultimately destroyed because Melelde did not intend for any race to go on forever, but was also caused by the Fallen One, which is confusing and raises important questions for me. Heresy? And here is the heart of my objections to Lewis and his tight allegory, or in this case, fitting a world with intelligent life out of Earth into Earth's salvation history. Lewis's version has me diligently inquiring into some of the finer theological aspects of his work. The idea that certain angels or Yarsa have control over their own spheres of influence, being the planets, is not exactly canon, but for lack of a better word, kosher. It was floated by Dante in the Divine Comedy, and Lewis picks it up here. But Lewis adds that Satan was the angel responsible for the sphere of the earth, and that his fall has since bound him to this sphere by the other Oyarsa. Not sure how I feel about that, as that concept was not even bridged by Milton, though scripture does call Satan the lord of this world. If only there was an alternate universe where one could explore such ideas without having to worry about things like church doctrine. The fruit of autonomy. Weston's speech on the progress of life, she has ruthlessly broken down all obstacles and liquidated all failures, and today, in her highest form, civilized man, and in me as his representative, she presses forward to that interplanetary leap which will, perhaps, place her forever beyond the reach of death. That sounds absolutely terrifying and villainous, personifying life not as a nurturing mother figure, but as a cold and severe empress who sits on the edge of a galactic gladiatorial pit, watching the lesser races fight each other for dominance.
Back to a time when we were lesser beings?
You are lesser beings.
Only for, if Lewis is correct, those lesser beings to pity each other and therefore come out on top together. That is the sort of story I would love to read. And I guess we'll find out together as next month I dive into Paralandra, the second book of the space trilogy. Please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss that, or my other adventures into similar themed novels. Thanks for watching!